and welcome to another episode of the Tell Not Show. As always, we're your hosts. We have the fantastic Kirsha Fox. She is the author of Sunday's Deception and The White Leaf Child. She's a homeschooling mom of four, avid reader, and gamer.
And my co-host is Julia J.K. Allen, editor, author, and author coach. She's a fantasy and horror author who loves to put magic in everything. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yes, we're very excited to welcome our guest.
Yes, our guest is A.K. Stuntz. She's a fantasy and sci-fi author who's released 2 books in her debut fantasy series, Rise of Witches. Welcome, A.K.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, we're very excited to have you tonight. Tell us a little bit about your author journey. What does it look like getting started, and what does it look like now?
So I actually started writing when I was very young. I had a hard time expressing myself, and so my mom gave me a pen and notebook and said, just write down all your thoughts. And it kind of just stayed as a part of my life all the way up until adulthood. And I finally just decided, you know what? I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do it. And that's kind of how it all started.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. It was just kind of born out of this need to communicate your thoughts, and that you just ran with it and developed it further. That's so exciting. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Why did you pick fantasy and sci-fi to write?
Well, originally I actually started writing historical romance because at the time that's what I read the most. But then I really fell in love with fantasy because there's so many different worlds and you can expand so much on things and just use your imagination, I guess. And so I just fell in love with fantasy and sci-fi, and just that's where I ended up.
Yeah, no, fantasy can be a lot of fun, especially to write. It's fun to read, but to write, you can do a lot with it. That's really interesting, though, that you started out with the historical romance and then kind of veered away. Do you still work romance into your stories then, your fantasy and sci-fi stories?
I didn't really work it in a whole lot for this series, but I am working on another series that is more romance than, sci-fi or fantasy. So.
Okay, yeah. Very, very nice. Tell us a little bit about your writing process. What does it look like going from idea to finished manuscript?
So when I first get an idea, I usually just jot it down. And if it's a good one, it usually keeps nagging at me and I keep adding to it until it kind of becomes a full line thought of this is how a story's going to start, this is how it's going to end. And from there, I just start filling in the pieces and start adding a plot to it, basically. And my idea of plotting is very basic. I'm more of a pantser. So I just start with, hey, chapter 1, this has to happen in order for the story to move forward. And I just kind of keep going until I get to the end.
Yeah, okay. So you do work kind of linearly then, and just discovering as you go.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, what is the most important part of writing?
Oh, I think to know that you can't do this alone. We're told, writing is supposed to be this solitary endeavor. And I guess for the most part, when you actually sit down to write, it is. No one else can write the story for you. But I think that it's important to have a support base behind you, someone who can encourage you or tell you, hey, you got to sit down and write today, even if this story doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, or let's talk it out and work through whatever issue you might be having with it. And I think that is so important to have.
It really is, especially if you don't necessarily have the support at home. Finding support with other writers is a really amazing, life-changing experience, I think, because it's once you find your people who get it, who get the struggle of getting the words down, and sometimes you hate it, sometimes you love it, and people who just understand who you are is so important. I agree. Yeah, finding your community. Mm-hmm. Especially because it is one of those things we love it the most, but we also hate it the most. So we need that encouragement to keep going on those days where writing's really hard.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely those moments where you're like, that's it, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. So sometimes I need that push from someone else.
No, totally understand that. And I think that's very true. Especially when we're kind of stuck either in the story, we're stuck in the story, or stuck sales wise, whatever is going on. Yeah, it's very easy to get discouraged as a writer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're sitting there like wringing your hands and tearing out your hair and pacing and muttering to yourself like a crazy person.
Right.
And someone's like, "Why are you
Yes.
doing this?" You're like, "It's my favorite thing." Okay, like
It feels like you're
Yes.
torturing
Yes.
yourself while you're writing this.
it's like you're gonna
Yes.
suffer, but you're gonna be happy about it. Like,
You're gonna be happy when it's all over and said and done with. Yes.
yes,
No. My
but
favorite feeling is having written.
yes.
Yes. Yes.
It's nice when it all comes together and it's finally clean, beautiful, and polished, and it's the
Yes.
best thing you can possibly make, and everyone else gets to read it too, and you just get to share that. And I think that feeling keeps us going.
It does. Yes. Yes. So I have a question for you. Do you think characters or plot comes first, and is it different when you're reading versus writing?
Oh, that's kind of a tough question. I
Yeah.
love more of a plot driven story. So
Okay.
when I'm writing and even when I'm reading, I love the plot. I think it's one of the more important aspects of a story. But on the other hand, you need to have a good character too, because the plot isn't anything without your characters. So
Mm-hmm.
I think they're both equally important, and I think I like both of them equally.
Yeah. So how do you go about finding your plot?
It usually just kind of pops
Mm-hmm.
into my head, this idea of, hey, this is what should happen. And then sometimes the characters kind of go off the rails and do their own thing, and I kind of have to work the plot around them, or they make the plot for
Right.
me.
Right. No. Yeah. We hear that all the time from people that they're just basically writing the report on what happens, and the characters
Yeah.
are deciding everything themselves. Yeah.
How do you get to know your characters?
I
Once you
do like a character questionnaire that, how old are they? What's their hair color? And then go more in depth into what's their weaknesses, what's their strengths, what's the one thing out of life that they want the most. And I don't know, there's a big
Right.
long list of questions, and that helps me really get to know who they are as a character.
Is that a big part of your brainstorming process before you begin sitting down to write then, or?
It is. As soon as I figure out, hey, this is a plot that I can run with, now I need to get my characters, and then I need to figure out what are they like and which character fits into what position or, mold, I guess you'd say, to enter into the
Right.
story.
Yeah, no, I love that. I really enjoy getting to know my characters as part of my process, but I know I'm a little bit more of a plotter than a true pantser. I'm kind of in a hybrid now. But yes, I love character questionnaires, interviews, all kinds of different ways of getting to know my character. So I always find that like for the character questionnaire that I've created for myself, it's like the basics for appearance, but the personality and the history, the backstory of the characters, so many more questions and so much more in depth than appearance.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's way more important to know. I know a lot of people will focus on like things like eye
I feel
color
like
and
the
stuff.
appearance
And,
is
yeah.
kind of like that's like the least important thing of your character, really.
Yes, yes, yes. Or like when they get down to like describing it and they're talking about like what type of nose and lips and eyes, and it's just like leave some things to the imagination. So like I like to do eye color, hair color, race, and then like a distinguishing characteristic, and then if that characteristic shows off a part of their personality, even better. Like
Yes, yeah.
yes. Like I have a character that has like a beauty mark. She sees as an imperfection, so she tries to cover it with makeup, but that like tells you about her being such a perfectionist and things like that. Yeah, I love those little details. But yes, no, getting to know the characters is like the most fun part of writing for me.
Yes, I like it when you can describe a character just like really concisely, but in that small description, you kind of like already know what they're talking about.
Right,
Like
right.
some
You get a real good
characters
sense of them.
described him as having like a cat-like face, and like the sharp features and the slant, and like
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, I know exactly what that is, or
Yeah.
it's tricky to do, but I don't think we
Right.
want necessarily the shape of their nose, like let it
I
out to
think
us.
too
Right.
many details is
Yeah.
not good.
But you do
Yes.
want to like describe them fairly early on in the book. Otherwise, like halfway through the book, they'll describe their blonde hair, and you're like, what? I thought they had brown hair. Like,
This
you
whole
know,
time,
so once
yeah.
you're pictured a certain way,
Yeah,
you sort
yeah,
of stays
definitely
that
need to
way.
get that in the first one.
It doesn't even matter
Yes.
what the author says. Like, you're like, nope, it's in my head now, and that's how they're gonna stay.
Right. Yeah, I can get pretty mad if I get an image of what the character looks like to me, and then the author finally tells what color hair they have, and it's just like, no, now it's all wrong. Yeah.
But yeah, yes, there's always this weird balance between like describing the scenery, describing the people, describing their positions and everything, and just moving on with the story. It's
No, I love the quote that it says, like, imagining, or yeah, the descriptions and stuff, it starts with the author, but it ends with the reader. Meaning, like,
Yeah.
we give half the description and then they make up the rest in their head as they're going along, which I like to let the reader do that because I like to be able to do that too as a reader. Yeah. So, my favorite question, one of them is, who is your favorite author and what do you think they do best?
So my favorite author kind of changes with
Yeah.
my mood of reading. And right now, Rebecca Yarros and her Fourth Wing series has been my favorite books to read. And I love her descriptions because it's a weakness that I have in my writing. So I'm like underlining things and making notes and going, oh my gosh, this is so good as I'm reading through it. And I love the stories too. The stories are really good, but I really love her descriptions. And it's not just of the world and their environment or where they're at a certain place. It's her descriptions of just like people, and everything is told through Violet's point of view, but yet we still can completely understand how these other characters are feeling by the way that they're acting or they're talking or their facial expressions. And that's my biggest weakness in writing. So I really am just learning from her, I guess.
Oh yeah.
No, it's great.
We study the masters, right? You find someone who does something really well and you study that and you pattern it, and you're not plagiarizing, you're not stealing, but you're learning from other people.
Yes. Yeah. There's no copying here. It's just like, oh, I love this description and I want to, keep that in mind.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's very important when we're finding our authors like voice in our writing style. A lot of times you figure out your writing voice and your writing style by looking at what other authors are doing first and kind of picking and choosing from each one what you like the most about them and their style and voice, and kind of honing it to be your own. So I think it's really great. Like people always say, like read like an author or a writer, because like you can learn so much by doing that. That's why I always kind of have a little chip on my shoulder whenever someone's like, I don't read, but I'm a writer. And I'm like, but you kind of need to read to like become, a master at the writing stuff. I feel like.
Yeah. Do you make movies but you don't watch them?
Right. Yeah. It's kind of one of those, I'm always like, but why? I hear a lot of times the criticism is like I think a lot of people who say that tend to say like they don't want to be like corrupted by other people's ideas, as though they're not going to write a story that there's no original story left. So it's like your story is going to be like somebody's story anyways. But like if you read, you get so many benefits as an author from reading. Yeah, like you were saying, where you can learn from other people. Yeah.
Not wanting to be influenced by an author while you're in the middle of a project. But in doing it, if you don't want that, you can read other styles of books. You can read nonfiction, sci-fi if you're writing fantasy, or if you're writing cozy, read a thriller,
Right.
But you can find inspiration from literally anywhere. Just a turn of phrase, the way they describe the way a character moves. You can find inspiration without necessarily worried that you're going to be too influenced, if that makes sense, I think.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And I love the advice to read widely in general, because you can learn something from every genre, how to develop relationships, from romance and world building, from fantasy and sci-fi. You can learn from really every genre of book. And so, if you don't want to be influenced in the story you're writing, read a different genre, but keep reading. Yeah. my soapbox rant.
Yes,
Um,
we feel very
but yeah,
strongly about this. So
yes. I'm always like, yes,
just
reading is a good thing.
cheerleading other authors on and letting them know, like, it's okay. It's okay. You can keep reading.
Yeah,
Although it's hard to find time to write, let alone find time to read and still do
yeah,
life.
and still do life. Yes, it is very,
Yes.
very hard.
All right. So, what have you learned yourself, like through the writing process? Like how are you changed by becoming an author?
I think that I learned more about myself when writing a book, and that I had the confidence to actually do it. It kind of gave me more self confidence actually after I actually did it and went, oh wow, I
Yeah,
could really do this. So it was just a learning curve for me to know that I can do something that no one else thought I could. So
yes, and congratulations on having written a book and then another one. That's amazing, and you should celebrate all of
yeah,
those victories. That I always tell
yes,
them, first draft done, we're going out to dinner. Every little milestone I hit for every
time
book,
to
I'm
celebrate.
celebrating that. Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's really important because one is I want to keep doing it. I need that positive reinforcement to kind of keep those positive endorphins associated with the writing process and getting things done. So I find that very helpful. But it's too, like, I think that, like, it's something that, I mean, almost everyone I've ever met, when they find out I'm a writer, they're like, oh, I have a story I would love to tell. But, like, very few people actually sit down and tell the story that they have inside them. And so when you are able to do that, it's like, yes, congratulations and celebrate, because that's something that, like, what, 3%
Yeah,
of Americans have done. Yeah, yeah, getting it to publish. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's very amazing. And I love that it has given you more confidence as well, because I know a lot of writers kind of suffer with imposter syndrome and all of that. So I love that you're just like, yes, I tackled it. I can do it. Yes. Like, that's great.
let's
If
write
you
another
don't
one.
have imposter syndrome, are you even an artist? Like,
Right.
That's true.
Right. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Neil Gaiman's little story about imposter syndrome when I think he met Neil Armstrong, and he was like,
Mhm.
Neil Armstrong's like, who am I to be here among all these people? And Neil Gaiman was like, if Neil Armstrong has imposter syndrome, then, like, we all have it. Because, like, that's, he's been in space. Still doesn't feel good enough.
If you
Yeah.
could tell a new author one thing, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that not to take every advice that they get,
Yeah.
and they need to find their own style of writing and their own way to do things, because everybody wants to like bombard you with all this advice and all this is how you should do, this is the right way, this is the wrong way, don't do it that way. But you have to find what works for you and then stick with that, and don't worry about what other people say, because there is no right or wrong way to write a book.
There definitely is not. Anyone who is saying there's one way to do it or not do it is probably selling you something. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I agree 100% that, like, that's why we talk about the writing process so much on the show, is to show how many different ways there is to do the writing thing.
Mhm.
But I agree. You should always take advice with, like, a kind of a grain of salt, but also to see, like, what works for you, because the advice to write every day, for example, might work great. It works great for some people that I know. Other people, it's like, oh my gosh, if I wrote every day, I would be like beating myself
Yeah,
up for not being able to do that every day because of, mood disorders or whatever you have going on, ADHD, you're a mom. There's so many different reasons why you can't necessarily write every day. And so I always tell people, yeah, find what works for you. And because just because it works for this person doesn't mean it's going to apply the same to you.
Mhm.
So I love
yeah,
that advice. Yeah, take every advice with a grain of salt. Um,
Yes. There's
Speaking of being so busy and having life happening and everything, how do you make time for writing? How do you prioritize your writing time?
I am a night owl, so most of my writing gets done at night after everybody else goes to bed because I really do need the quiet to be able to focus. So it usually happens between like 10 and midnight or sometimes even later, depending on when I get tired, I guess. So yeah, definitely a nighttime writer.
Yeah, nighttime's kind of my prime time as well, which unfortunately the world does not operate for us night owls.
Oh no.
My whole life, everyone's like, "Oh, early bird gets the worm." Yeah, and everyone's always like, "Yeah, you got to be a morning person," and I'm like, "But why? My circadian rhythm is the exact opposite." You know? Yeah. I feel like I'm waking up at 8 p.m. and I'm just like, "Ooh, now is the time to be alive." And then like before noon, I'm just like, I can't even function.
I need the caffeine and the coffee in the mornings.
Yes, I know. There's nothing like being tired all day and then it's nighttime and you wake up and you're just like, oh, we're awake now at the wrong time of day again. Love it. But yeah.
Sometimes you get inspired at just the wrong time. And they're like, why were you up till 4 a.m.? You're like, because the inspiration. I couldn't waste it. Yes. But you're like, it was worth it.
Yeah. No, it's always worth it the next morning. You're just like, I'm a zombie, but I got writing done last night, so it's worth it. So do you have any tips when it comes to prioritizing writing time and, you know, things like, do you have like a ritual that you do every night or you just like 10 o'clock hits and you're like, it's time?
No, when the house gets quiet and I am not needed for anything else, then I am sitting down and I am writing and I just like get right to it. Sometimes I have to reread a paragraph or two.
Yeah,
find out where I'm at in the story. But yeah, I just kind of just sit down and start writing. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I love that. Do you have a favorite part of writing?
I think just writing the first draft, just getting it out of my head and onto the paper, that draft that is just for me, no one else is ever going to see it. That is my favorite part.
Yes. When you're telling the story to yourself, right? That is so fun to discover what's going on and all the little intricacies of the plot and story.
It's like the easy and the fun part before you have to do all the revisions, and that gets hard.
Yes. Before you have to read it 100 times and do your edits. Oh goodness, yeah.
It's that high point of like you still love your story and it's the best story ever, and you haven't like started like
tearing it apart. Yeah, no, it's still shiny and new and fun to play with. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what is your least favorite part then?
The editing.
Yeah.
I don't mind like doing a revision once or twice, but when you get down to the nitty gritty editing part, like, oh no, I don't like it anymore.
Yeah, no, I'm an editor and I love editing other people's stories, but I hate doing my own, if I'm honest, because it's just like when I'm writing the rough draft, I'm just having fun and I'm like, oh, good writing is rewriting. I'll worry about making it nice in the edit. So then when editing comes, I'm like, I feel the pressure and I'm like, now I have to make it good. And like, I just put a lot of pressure on myself. But it's fun when you're working with other people's stories and you're just like, oh, I can play with this, you know. So we have a lot of people who say that editing is kind of like their least favorite part, and I think it probably has to do with the fact that you read your story literally 100 times.
Before you
until you're like,
the editor.
Yes, and then you're just like, I hate this. Please do something with it so I can not touch it for a month. Yeah. Fix it for me. Yeah, no, I understand that feeling very well.
And even the editor doesn't necessarily fix it for you. They plant flags showing you everything that's wrong. You still have to fix it. But
I know it's intimidating getting that back and seeing all these like comments and marks and like fix this and fix that. And I thought it was pretty good by that time, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's. I always tell people when they get their comments back, just like stay with it for a few days, especially when they're new to the writing process and new to editing, because like your initial response would be like, get defensive and explain everything about why I did things the way I did, and it's just like, okay, yeah, like that's fine, but yeah, just take a moment with the suggestions and kind of like let you absorb them, and then like get over the feelings, and then in a few days you can look at them and kind of with like steadier feet, see what's going on with the comments.
They aren't as bad as what they seem.
Exactly.
No, they're not. But like, yeah, when it's your baby and you've written it and you get all those comments back, it can be very daunting and overwhelming for sure.
Like, how dare you call my baby ugly?
Right, yeah.
But you have to remember the editor is not attacking you. They are trying to help you get better.
Yeah.
And you really have to chuck your pride in the bin and keep
Right. What would you say influences your writing?
I think the biggest influence I have, and I get like influence from just my environment and what I'm around, plays a lot into my stories. But I think when I look at pictures and I'm like seeing things in these pictures that are influencing how my story unfolds, especially when I get character art done for my characters, because a lot of times I actually get that done before I finish writing the story.
Okay.
Because I tend to get excited. And so that sometimes influences how a character might react in a certain situation just by something I saw that they had done in their character art.
Yeah, so you are more of a visual person. Do you do like storyboards or mood boards for your novels then too?
Yes. Yeah, I do a lot of mood boards and stuff.
Yeah. And is it one of those things like while you're writing, it's kind of like a movie playing in your head?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, nice. I think mood boards are so fun to do when you're in that draft, like that idea phase, and you're just like, what do my characters look like, and doing all of that stuff. Do you do that on Pinterest or?
Yeah, I do Pinterest, and sometimes I just Google and randomly type in something and see what comes up, and then look at the pictures and say, "Oh, I like that."
Yeah. I have to do that for clothing because being a fantasy writer, I'm like, what do you call that fabric that you sort of wrap around? I have to Google and find it and find
Google's
the word.
Like your best friend.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been working on some short stories for horror, and my search history is very questionable right now. Like, what's a way to permanently disable somebody? I swear I'm not up to anything naughty. Just writing.
To do open heart surgery at home. How much can you lose before you die?
Some of the stuff that I've searched recently, I'm just like, that looks bad.
How long you wear before you're brain dead?
Anyway. Right. No, yeah, it's very much like, what happens when you stab someone in the kidney? Like,
can you survive an arrow to the anyway?
Yeah, I promise we're just writers. Nothing bad is happening over here.
Yes. Don't show anyone your search history.
I'm just an author. Don't arrest me.
Luckily for me, especially because I do tutoring as well, the rest of my search history is all like, what does this word mean?
You look more.
I'm always looking up for definitions of stuff. So I'm like, I'm hoping that that FBI guy that's watching me, he sees all the definitions that I look up, and he's like, oh, she's just a writer. Yeah.
Do you ever deal with writer's block, and how do you overcome that?
I have never really had a big issue with writer's block, but I think a lot of it is because I have a lot of different projects going on at one time. So even though I may be working on one story, I may be plotting another, or I might be working on a short story, or completely writing a whole nother story sometimes. So I think having different projects going on all at the same time helps me not really just get stuck on something.
That makes sense.
I also really enjoy working on multiple projects at once because, if you get stuck or you're like, I'm not really sure what happens next with this one, I can jump to project B and work on that. And when I get stuck, go back to A or go to C or something like that. So that works really well for me as well to kind of jump around, especially if it's in like different stages of the process of writing.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're like, I'm editing this one. And then when I get sick of editing, I can go to the fun stuff over here. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
no, I kind of
yourself,
embrace the chaos. Yeah.
that process works for you, because a lot of people cannot fathom working on more than one project at a time. They need to they need to focus on that one thing, and the other things will distract them away. But if you're that kind of person who needs multiple projects to move from one to the other to avoid being blocked, or it works for you.
Well, I found too that sometimes when I'm working on another story, then I get the idea that works me out of whatever plot hole or whatever issue I'm having in another one. So
yes, those little, it shakes up your brain just enough when you're working on something else. Yeah, no, that's really, really helpful. And yeah, I know there's some writers that are like have really intricate plots or like so many threads that they have to hold on to. I'm sure it's a nightmare to even think about working on 2 projects at once. I will let you ask your favorite question.
Oh, right. What has been your most significant writing victory so far?
I think for me, it was actually the first time that I made a sale that was not to a friend or a family member, or felt like it was, they felt like they had to buy it, but some random stranger bought my book and wanted to read it. And that was, just so inspiring, I guess, for me to go, okay, so they will read my books. I need to keep writing them. Like, keep going. So that was it for me.
Yeah, no, congratulations. I always love those organic sales when it's just like, oh, but you bought my book on purpose. Yay!
I don't know who you are, but thank you.
Right. No, it's so exciting when that happens. So I love that. Yeah, that answer. It's a big victory for sure. I know. Yeah. Because it's like, just friends and family, you're going to get some sales from them. But like when it's just like you have no stake in the game and you still bought it, like that's always a great feeling. Yeah.
So exciting. Those first few pays, the payouts that they give, they show up in your account, and you're like, I made money from people who don't know me. Like,
even when it's just like pennies on the,
it doesn't matter.
For like an ebook, it still is just like, somebody read my book.
Someone took a chance and wanted to read my book. So that's a good feeling.
No, that is amazing. So we kind of talked a little bit earlier about taking advice with like a grain of salt, but do you have any writing advice that you just hate, that like you think is either really poorly applied, too broad of a brush, or anything like that?
I think the worst advice that people often give is when someone says, oh, I want to write a book, where do I start? And they just say, oh, well, just start writing. Write every day and you'll get better. Because it's kind of only half the equation. Because if you continue to write and you continue to write poorly because you don't know what you need to fix or what you need to change, you're not ever going to get any better. So writing every day is good, but you also need to get feedback on your writing. So it always bothers me when someone says, oh, just write every day, you'll get better.
Yes, no, I completely 100% agree, because I hear this all the time with people who are just like, oh, you just got to put your 10,000 hours in. But you need that feedback. You need people telling you like, hey, you need to work on descriptions. Hey, your setting's not, whatever it is that, everyone's going to have strengths and not so strong areas. So you need to know that in order to know, A, what you're doing well to keep doing, B, what you need to work on. Because like you said, you can put in your 10,000 hours, but if you're not getting any course correction or feedback in that 10,000 hours, then you're just making bad habits. So I completely agree with that advice, because yes, you definitely need input on your writing to see what needs to be worked on to get that practice in. No, I love that.
Every profession, you need tools. Every profession, you need a certain amount of training. If you don't have those, then you might be ingraining bad habits further, or be placing yourself at a disadvantage, so that like the process becomes so much harder than it needs to be.
And
you need to arm yourself with some good knowledge and good good soundboards and people who are going to support you, and not yes men who are going to tell you that writing is perfect and you just keep doing what you're doing because it's awesome. No,
don't get your family to read your work.
Right. Yeah, you would ideally get feedback from other writers or other people who are either like really good readers and know how to read like a writer, or other writers, because it's just like, yeah, your family can be like, yeah, this is a great story, your imagination is great, but they don't know what the mechanics of the novel writing part to be like, oh, but you should work on this, or necessarily. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times when they're super close to you, it can be hard too, because you're just like, do I trust what you're saying, or are you worried about my feelings and sparing those?
Yes. Make sure the advice you're getting is like from someone who's in your genre necessarily as well.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, right. You don't want to get thriller advice when you're writing a fantasy and it's like the opposite is going on too. I do want to say too, though, that those tools you can get, you don't need to go to school or anything to be good at writing, or become a great writer. But like, those tools you can get from reading like a writer, you can get from other writers, like just having those conversations about the mechanics of writing and stuff. So but no, I love that advice of there's more than just right, because you wouldn't show up to your job first day at work and be like, what do I do? And they're like, oh, just do it. Just do it. You'll be fine. You'll see what happens. You know what I mean? Like,
figure it out as you go.
Yeah. There's some helpful things to know, and helpful things to look for. And so, there's more than just writing. I love that.
All right. So can you tell us where people can find out more about you online, where they can find your books?
I am all over social media, and my books right now are exclusive on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. But yeah, I'm all over social media. I'm on Threads and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and I don't even know, everywhere.
What is your social media handles that people should look at?
Usually just type in AK Stuntz and it pulls me up. I think on one I had to put a number on the end of it for one, but yeah, AK Stuntz usually finds me.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, it's been a fabulous conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, our pleasure. And thank you to everyone who's listening along at home. Remember, there's more than one way up the mountain, and our next episode will air Friday as usual. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, you can find us on social media at The Talnut Show, or email us at thetalnutshow@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach, and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks, and see you next time.